Welcome to another episode of An Extraordinary Take, where we share extraordinary ideas and visions with extraordinary people. My name is Sibonisile Ngubane-Khosa, and I'm so excited that you've taken the time to join me as we learn and grow together. Let's get into it, shall we? Hello there. Welcome to another episode of An Extraordinary Take. My name is Sibonisile Ngubane-Khosa, and I am ecstatic to be on this chair again, and for this incredible opportunity to get to chat to you and to interact with you. I want to say thank you so much for every new subscriber, for every single person that interacts with, the stuff that we put out. It means so much to me. I do also want to say that there are a couple of changes that we are making. So, for example, we have now gone bi-weekly instead of weekly, which means we post a new episode every 2 weeks. It just is a lot more easier to manage. We did have a fumble the previous week, and that's because I had the incredible opportunity of gracing the TEDx stage. That meant that there was a lot of preparation beforehand. It was so exciting. I still can't believe it, but it was so affirming as well that I got that opportunity and that I got to speak about, something that I care so deeply about. So I will also be sharing the link to that TED talk once it's out. Apparently it's like a whole process. It has to be sent to TEDx New York, and then they have to approve, then it has to be sent back, and then only then it can go live. It's quite a thing, but it should be probably maybe like a month or so. I loved it. I was super nervous, but I felt like I belonged there. And it was so interesting. Afterwards, I met up with a couple of my friends, and one of them said, do you remember, this was at our first job, so probably more than 10 years ago. They're like, you said that you would do a TED Talk. And I was like, I don't remember that, but it does sound like something that I would say, so I'll take it. So it was just so great seeing how some of the stuff that you kind of hope for and that you say, how you can be living in it, in your present, something that you thought could be maybe, and you're hoping maybe it could be part of your future, in just you saying it and just you putting it out there. It can happen. So I thought that was great. So that's why we couldn't have an episode anyway. That's a long-winded way of saying that's why we didn't have one last week. We're back now though. We've had such great episodes, I think, back to back, that if you're new here, you should definitely check out. We had an incredible conversation with Kuda a couple of weeks ago now on relationships, on being single and cultivating a healthy single life. And some of you guys really love that. So if you're new and you haven't checked that out, please do. It's such a great way to perceive being single and perceive relationships. And it's such a beautiful way to also look at the purpose of being single. And not as this thing of just like, life is only going to be worthwhile when I get married. So I loved that. We also did one with Mutle Motibe on parenting. That's one of my favorites because he just has such a beautiful perspective on the role of parenting, and that in a way, he actually made me realize that it's a calling. It's not just something you go and do. It's something you have to work hard at. It's something that you practice and you constantly figure out how to improve yourself so that you can be better at it. So check out Redefining. I think it's Redefining Fatherhood with Mutle Mutibe. Then we also did one on Black Tax, which was a follow-up to the first one that we did with Pumza. I also really love that because, again, it was such an extraordinary take for me on how to set boundaries with families, but also how to set ourselves for success in not getting caught up in some of the really bad behaviors and cycles of money, the fact that we don't talk about money, the fact that we're so afraid to say no. We don't know how to have boundaries, healthy boundaries. And I've learned so much from just those three. And it's been so incredible, the value that we were able to add and the people that we're able to speak to that just have such great insight on how we can be our best selves. So today it's me, and I am just so ecstatic and so also really grateful to be able to share insights and the things that I'm learning. I really believe myself to be a great manifester, if I can call it that, because now it's a new thing. But like, I think I've done such a great job at living out some of the things that I once just dreamed of, that I just once spoke about. I was reading some of my old journals last night and just looking at some of the stuff that I've spoken into existence. And I was mind blown. And I think that one of the things that excite me most about being alive is that I get to co-create this incredible life with God, that I get to shoot for the stars and see it actually come to being. And my heart really is to be able to share that with as many people as I can. But I also find that even though I tend to be so intentional about that, like I'm so intentional about how I speak about myself, how I speak about my future. A friend of mine said to me the other day, you remember I was talking to you and you said, I'm going to be very successful. And the moment it happens, it's going to happen so fast. And I was like, wait, what? I said that? Like, that was so brazen of me. And this is in my early 20s, by the way. I had not done much. But I thought, even just reading back to all these diary entries, I've really been so true to that. But I think over the years, as I got older, a part of that was lessened a little bit in just how boldly I could speak about it. And I don't know, like, I don't know if it's just life or what it is, but there's, I have an example of what I mean by that. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago. And that's, if you follow me, that's the point of the podcast today, of the episode today. She was talking about parenthood, and parenting and how difficult it is and just how much it requires of you. And I do think that being a parent in today's society is wild. I do think that I take my hat off to parents that are raising Ama 2000 or even the toddlers of today, because the kids now just have so much more access, even access to language. They can vocalize things that we never could. And so they require more out of you. So we were having this conversation. And then at some point, my friend says to me, but I'm so happy for you, because I think that you're going to have such a different experience. I think you're going to have such a beautiful experience of being a parent and being a mom, because you have had the time to do the work on yourself. You've had the time to figure out what your own traumas are. And you've really been doing the work of ensuring that you don't as much as possible, transfer that onto your kids. And she was saying like that's work that she's only started now, and her daughter's already a teenager. So it's almost like you're doing all this catching up, So she's like, I really think that you're going to have a better experience, and that it's going to serve not just you, but it's also going to serve your children in like the best way possible. And so then there's something that wants to fly into my eye. So then I found myself, as we always do, it's just very interesting thing that when this happens, but I found myself going, I mean, you really never know. I could do all of that and they still hate the whole thing. And even as I said it, I felt in that moment that I had betrayed myself. Like I felt in that moment that I was not being true, one, not just to who I am, but also wasn't being true to the future version of myself that I am working towards, if that makes any sense. And after the conversation, I really, I sat with myself and I was like, why did I say that? Like that doesn't make sense, because the truth is I have done a lot of work. I have been very intentional. I have really, really gone into the dumps of who I am, what I've gone through, and really looked at what it looks like to heal. And I'm constantly on that journey. And I know that's true. But for whatever reason, in that moment, I found myself kind of downplaying that. But more than that, which I think is more dangerous, more than that, I was speaking something that was contrary to what I was actively trying to build. And that's where the self-betrayal part, comes in. And I know that this is common, right? But the more I was thinking about it, I was thinking about how we are raised to preempt our failures more than we preempt the fruition of our goals, more than we preempt our successes. Like if you look at even just how we're taught never to brag, like don't brag, don't speak too much about your achievements. You never know. Don't tell people your plans. You never know who's watching. It's like there's always this lingering fear. Even when we meet certain successes, there's this constant lingering fear that it could be taken away at any moment. And so what we do is we preempt our fears more than we preempt our success. And we preempt it by downplaying our contributions, by downplaying our current successes, and almost like shrinking ourselves, right? And when I was thinking about it, I thought what it actually is there is this fear of being humbled by life in our community. It's so deep. Everyone has this undertone of, yay, don't be too happy. Like, hey, own your success, own your achievements, but don't do too much. The moment you do too much, you never know, And I know that part of that probably comes from some experience, but I do think that there's a level of unhealthiness in that makes us live out of fear. It's this thing that we do where we are so afraid that we will be humbled by life, so we humble ourselves first. And we don't humble ourselves in the positive sense of being humble, because I think being humble has a positive connotation, but there is an overdoing it that comes with diminishing, like making ourselves smaller, shrinking, our current success. And I started thinking about how does that affect the future success. If I start shrinking something when it's still just a conception, it's still just an idea, and already I'm making it smaller, already I am preempting all the ways that it could go wrong. Like, this thing hasn't even happened yet. Right? In this conversation, all my friend is saying to me is like, hey, I'm looking at the work that you've put in, and based off of that, I really think that you're going to have such a great outcome, right? You've put 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 together, and I think it's going to equal to 5 or whatever the correct number is. And I'm going, maybe it'll just be equals to 0, or maybe it'll just be equal to 1. Like, why? Why do we do that? Again, it's that fear. And so I started thinking about how, particularly as women, we need to redefine bragging. Like, what does it look like to brag in a way that serves your future, in a way that serves your future self? So I'll give you an example. When I was thinking about that conversation, if I could go back and replay that whole entire scenario, when my friend was saying that to me, what I would have said, or what I wish I could have said, was, oh my goodness, thank you. Thank you that you see the effort that I've made. And it's true. I really, really am making great advances towards the kind of parent that I want to see myself being. And I think I've made great efforts, and I really do believe that it'll pay off. I don't think that my work has been in vain, and I'm really actually excited to see how it's going to turn out, because obviously it's still, in the working stages. But yeah, I believe that too. I completely agree with you. I think the way that I'm going to parent is going to be really reflective of the work that I've done now. And I believe that it's really going to be successful. I would have said something along those lines instead of going, we'll see. And I think often we also want to commiserate, and in wanting to commiserate, we betray ourselves. So you're talking to somebody and they're saying, hey, life is tough, man. Like, uningi, the price of petrol, groceries, imsebenzi ayikho, all of these things. And in your heart that, yes, while that is true to a certain degree, you've actually been having a great couple of months. Like, for the most part, you've been able to afford all the food that you want. You've been able to have petrol in your car. Like, life hasn't really been that bad for you. But the moment that somebody starts saying that, you find yourself going, I know you're right, bro. Like, gunzi ma. And then you also want to add your own anecdotes. Like, you want to give this thing more life. So you start adding things like, the other day I was at Woolies, I couldn't even buy this thing, and because you want to make it more real. And in that moment that you do that, you are betraying your current blessing, because the reality of it is you are currently living in somewhat of a blessing, in that all the things that you're speaking about, or all the things that this person is complaining about, that currently isn't your reality all the way through. I know that we've all had this experience, right? And I think there's obviously fear of, like, you don't want to sound out of touch, right? No one wants to be the person when your friend is saying, your life is really, really tough. Like, everything is going absolutely wrong, and you go, oh, I'm having such a great time. Like, I'm enjoying it out here. You don't want to be that person. But I do think that we go to the extreme where we then want to completely write off our experience at the expense of the other person, right? And what that does is it doesn't allow for our circles to be full circles of joy. It doesn't allow for our circles to be circles where we're not just speaking about the struggles that are here, but we're also speaking about the futures that we're hoping to build, right? Because I do think that it's important to contextualize the time that we're in, but it's also important to remember, like, to what end, right, is this complaining for? Like, if we're saying, yo, it's so bad, okay, what are we talking about? What have we had to rejig maybe in our finances? Like, so for me, a more helpful conversation is, yo, life is so tough, groceries, whatever. So I've actually looked at this method where I buy groceries in this way instead of that way. Then it doesn't end at just the complaint. There is something that we are working towards. There is something that I really believe so strongly around energy, and how when you're in a room and you're in a conversation with a couple of people, however many people, think about the bulk of the conversation that you have had. If you could quantify that in energy, what is the majority of that energy? Like, does it contribute to positive energy, or does it contribute to negative energy? So if you have spent 2 hours with somebody or 2 hours with a group of people, the majority of what it is that you are speaking about, if you could take that and it is food, or it is something that you could deposit back into yourself, what contribution does it make inside of you? And just thinking around that really makes me see the importance of changing the connotations of certain things, but also changing the direction of certain conversations, and not allowing them to sit in negativity, to sit in lack of solution, and to sit in just a lot of pessimism. And I think part of where the issue comes in is we are really taught that bragging is not good. And we're taught that to be humble in the extent that you never show people just how good your life is. You never share just what a good time you're having. You never share the full extent of the joys that you're experiencing. I think it can affect your own cultivation of that joy and your own appreciation of that joy. Because if I leave that conversation, then I go, yeah, maybe as this person is right. Like, it makes me then also start concentrating a lot more on the negatives than on the positives that I was experiencing in my life. So one of the things that I really was looking at is like, what does it really look like to create a culture of bragging in our friendship groups? Like, I had a dinner a couple of weeks ago after my TED talk, and afterwards I was speaking to a friend of mine about it, and I was like, you know what felt really amazing? I loved that I could brag about my success and this achievement all night, without feeling like I was doing too much, or without feeling like I could offend somebody. I felt like I was in a group of people who were so equally happy for me. They were even topping my own brags. Like, they were doing me one up on my own bragging fest. But at no point did I think, I wonder if I did too much. I wonder if I hurt someone's feelings when I was speaking about how happy this whole thing made me. I wonder if I negated someone else's experience. Like I genuinely felt safe. And I don't think we speak enough about that some of the things that cause us to diminish ourselves is because we don't feel safe enough to brag in our circles. And if you are in circles where you can't brag fully, like go, I ate that. Like I absolutely was incredible. I ate and left no crumbs. Girl, you should have seen me. I was so good. And they go, wait, what do you mean? Really? Of course you were. Like that's amazing. I think that does something to our psyche. And I think it's also so important because we weren't raised in spaces like that. Like I remember growing up and we were told stuff like, hey, ujabule kakhulu uzojab. Like, and so my friends and my cousins and I started doing this thing where like if we'd had like a really great day at school, we'd start preempting what could go wrong at home. Like, I'm so happy. I wonder what's going to go wrong. Like, no, I'm going to get home, bazongishaye ekhaya and whatnot. And I really do think that now in my sort of next phase, when I look at my circles, when I look at my community, when I look at my friends and my friendships, I want to cultivate spaces where I can boast about the goodness of God in my life, and I can brag about how I am seeing the fruition of the things I once prayed for, and that is it is accepted, it is encouraged, and it is magnified. Because I do think that helps you become more confident in even calling greater things to come, right? And so it made me just think, like, a lot of the times, on the one hand, we do it to ourselves, right? Where we diminish ourselves because of our own fears of what could go wrong. But sometimes it's a lack of safety in the spaces that we're in. So one of the things that taught me is like, I need to get better at bragging. I need to get better at saying, absolutely, you're right. I really was so great. And if anything, I think this is going to lead to great opportunities, and I can't wait for what's more to come. And you know what? I believe that if you are in the right circles, when you start doing that, what you will do is you will create allowance and space for other people to start doing the same. Because really, when we become so much more of ourselves, when we own our right to be fully who we are without shrinking ourselves, we allow and we give license for other people to do the same. And I think it just takes one person in a healthy friendship group to start owning their success, to start owning their achievements. And then you start seeing like other people going, hey, I got called in to the office by a friend of mine, I got called into the office by my boss and they said my report was really great. And we make a moment out of that. Like we celebrate that. We say, hey, let's go out for drinks. Like that's so great. I really, really want to cultivate a lot more of that moving forward. And the other part of it that I really think is also important is betting on yourself. So the one part is learning how to brag and how to brag in safe spaces where it's amplified and people are with you, and they encourage it. And if you aren't in spaces where that's okay, whether it's family or whatever, brag to yourself. Like, after you have done an incredible presentation, go inside your house and pop yourself a bottle of whatever, if that's what you do, or write it down and say, I'm so proud of myself today. I was so confident. I was so ballsy. I did something that I never thought I could do, and I want to see more of that in myself. You go, girl, brag to yourself about yourself, and watch how you start attracting more moments and more opportunities that allow more of that self to come through. I think what they also speak about a lot is women are so much more wired to receive criticism than we are to receive a compliment. So if you have done something incredible and there's a report on, how well you did or whatever, a lot of the times what happens, and I think it's a human condition, but women struggle a lot more with it, where in that report of, oh my God, you did so well, this was perfect, this was great, the one person or the one thing where they maybe said, your delivery on this part could have been better, or you didn't speak loud enough, or that is the one thing that's going to stand out. And you're going to get so fixated on that everything good that was said, you don't even remember anymore. And I think that just goes to show that, like, as a society, we aren't, and particularly as women, we aren't cultivating spaces where we make room for more compliments and we take them in and we say, yes, I agree. Thank you. I do look good. Yes, I agree. Thank you. I did do well in that thing. And we, in the end, just stay so fixated on what we did wrong rather than what we did right. And I've seen, working in the corporate space or working in an agency where, you come in and it's usually white people. And sometimes I feel like they come in with just bare minimum ideas. Like, it's really not that great, but they come at it with such confidence that you're like, maybe it's me. Maybe there really is something incredible to this idea. It's just, they have this sense of self-worth that just stands out and everybody believes them. And I really do think that that's important to cultivate. But the next thing that I think we have to be willing to learn if we're going to undo this fear of humbling ourselves or this fear of being humbled by life is you have to bet on yourself. Like, how people bet and they are willing to put so much money because they've looked at this horse or they've looked at whatever the thing is and they're like, this one, I believe in this one. Like, even I've been watching its previous races. Like, this is what it scored previously. And, it hasn't had any injuries, or even when it had an injury, it recovered so quickly. Like, they have so much knowledge about the expertise of this thing that they're willing to put money onto it. And I think you need to treat yourself the same way. You need to bet on yourself. Like, bet on yourself in the sense that you're like, I actually think this girl's really going to be successful. I think she's going to do it. I think just looking at her track record, even at times where she faced, a couple of failures, even when she lost a couple of opportunities, she's always been able to come back. Like, speak about yourself in a way that, like, as though you are a product that is going to market, that is about to change the face of the market. Speak about yourself as an offering that has been worked on and has been cultivated, that is really about to change the game and is really about to bring success, not just for the product itself, but everybody that's involved. And it's also about, I guess, if you're not there faking it till you make it, really, really saying it. But I also like using actual examples of like, think about the time where, you finished matric and you didn't have a plan for what you were going to do. Then you got a job and then you saved enough money to go to university, whatever. Like, think about the times where you have made something out of nothing. Think about the times where you have cultivated and created success when people did not think it was possible. Use those things as ways to prove and to convince yourself that you are worth betting on. Use that as leverage to say, like, looking at what this person has done so far, I really think that this is possible. And we really have to be the kind of people who invest in ourselves, in how we speak about ourselves, in the opportunities that we give to ourselves, like in the spaces that we make available for ourselves. Like, if you're betting on yourself, you're not going to skimp out on yourself. If you know that you need to do a course in order to get better at whatever thing that it is that you want to do, if you've bet on yourself, you're going to spend that money, right? Like, if you're betting on yourself, on really being successful, you're going to take a trip and you're going to spoil yourself because you know that you are worthy and you are deserving of good things. So you have to, one, be willing to brag about yourself to yourself and to others, yes. And you also have to be willing to bet on yourself, to really bet on yourself as a winning horse. Like, I think this one, if anything, Noba Uzabak we top 3. Like, I genuinely believe it. And I've seen how it's worked in my life because I really feel like so many of the years that I've lived are a product of things that I said to myself about myself and I said to others about myself that I've now seen come to fruition. And it's also things that God has said about me. Like, even when you look at the Bible, we often speak about like, oh no, you humble yourself and whatnot, as though it's part of like being a Christian. But if you look at the people God called, the moment they say, oh no, I can't do this, God actually encourages them and God says, no, you can. And God says to Jeremiah, don't say that you're just a child. Like, don't say that you're too young. Don't say that you can't. And so there is this thing about like, we think that it is godly to put ourselves down. We think that it is godly and it is more Christian-like to say, oh, I don't know, maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not. But if you think about it, that is completely contradictory to faith. That's completely contradictory to who God has called us to be and the things that God has said about us. Like, you will be the head and not the tail. God would not have ever said any of those things to us if he wanted us to play small. He would never have said any of those things to us if he did not believe that we were created for more and we are created to show up, and it's exactly the same thing through everybody that God has called kind of looks down on themselves and has this thing of like, oh, Moses says, oh, I have a list, like I can't do it. And God says, you can. David, same thing, and I really think that part of being the best version of ourselves means going back and undoing some of the things that even our well-meaning parents, did or cultivated in us that are actually burdensome, that are not conducive to where it is that we are trying to go. Because sometimes you shrinking yourself and you being overly humble is not conducive to the rooms that you're supposed to go into and change. it's not conducive to the people whose lives are waiting to be transformed by you and by your creation of whatever it is, whatever product it is that's supposed to come from you, whatever work, whatever art. If you stay small and you shrink yourself, you are doing a disservice, not just to yourself, but to the contribution that you're supposed to make here. So I really do think that from the onset, God bet on us. Like when he says, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you, I set you apart. That was him betting on us. Like, I am betting on you. I know you. I know where it is that you're going. I know what it is that you can do. I know what it is that you can achieve. And I've already made the plans for you to live fully in that. So when you start walking in that and people start seeing it and people start calling you out and people start going, hey, you're doing so well in this field. And then you go, oh yeah, I'm just trying. You are directly going against what God has said and called you and set you out for. It makes no sense. Own it. Own it to the full extent. The other thing that is my third point that I think is also fundamentally important and is probably, I think, my favorite out of all of this is believe that you might just be the exception. Like, believe that you might just be the exception. I think we have so many examples of people who don't make it, quote unquote, and we don't really talk enough about the people who did something that seemed impossible. Like, or rather, I think we do talk about them, but I don't think we identify with the exceptions. Rather, I think we think the exceptions are outside of us. And when I speak about exceptions, I think about, say, there's so many great comedians in the country. Then there's like a Trevor Noah, right? Trevor Noah was an amazing comedian in South Africa, had great success here, was beloved, all the things. And then he dared to branch out. And it worked out for him, and it worked out in the most incredible ways. And I know that examples like that are so few and far in between for us. But I actually believe that part of the solution to getting there, or even getting so close to there, is actually daring to believe that you might be the exception in whatever it is that you're trying to do. So I don't want us to go into being famous because that's what everybody does, but think about parenting and this example that I made at the beginning. What my friend was saying to me was that essentially, like, the work that you've done could mean that you become an exception in how you parent and how you experience being a parent. And I immediately went, no, I don't, maybe not, and it's like, but why not? And me owning that would me be going like, okay, I know that fundamentally people struggle with parenting for the most part. Even I don't know if that's true in its entirety. I think those are the stories that we're exposed to. But there is a whole other world where people are killing it. Mutle Motibe as an example, right? So I believe for me to meet my desired state of being the kind of parent that I never experienced, I have to believe that I can be the exception. That just because I have not seen it work out for some people does not mean that it won't work out for me, because that's also the issue with preempting your failure, is you use other people as case studies who have nothing to do with you, whose work you don't know, whose effort you don't know, whose thought process you don't know. Like, you don't know what they tell themselves. You don't know what they believed in or what they didn't believe in. But the moment you see their failures, you take them as your own before you've even gotten there. And I've really been thinking about that. And I was like, shoo, this requires for me to be really delusional. You know, it really requires me to think in all the things that I'm working on or dreaming of or working towards before I can first believe that, I don't know if it's going to work out, or I don't know if, I don't know how it's going to go. I could maybe just think, maybe it's going to be me. What if it's me? What if of everybody else that I know? What if in my family? What if in my friendship group? What if in my community? What if it's me? What if I can do it? What if I will be the exception? And I think if you start thinking like that, the reason why I think it works is because if you start thinking like that, it'll fundamentally change even what you do. Because if you think you're going to be the exception, you're going to start moving like you're the exception. You're going to start putting a certain level of work that somebody who believes that something is possible for them would start doing, right? Whereas if you're already going into it with like, I've never seen this work before. I've never seen anybody do this in this way, and I've never seen them succeed in the way that I wish to succeed. Chances are you're going to play it small. Chances are you're not going to bet on yourself. Chances are you're not even going to brag about the few contributions that have been successful that you've been able to make, right? And so I really love this perspective of like, what if you're going to be the exception? I think about somebody like Tusombedu, who also, again, very successful in South Africa, and had an incredible group of friends of other actors and actresses who, some of whom were even more successful than her. And I can just imagine some of the conversations that were happening the moment she decided, okay, I'm going to go try out in LA. Like, I've done the things here in South Africa. I've done a pretty great job and I'm making good money, but I think there's more and I'm going to try it out. There are actors who aren't even her peers, but who have been in the game longer than she has, who have experienced more success here than she has, who have never ventured there, who've never even dared to try. And so it really would have required for her to, one, dare to believe, just dare to believe and dare to entertain the thought that maybe, just maybe, she could be the exception. Because if you don't even entertain the thought, if you don't even give it room to culminate in your head, if you don't even consider it, then you can't even allow for a world where it's possible. And if you really think about it, what do you have to lose? What do you lose by just thinking about it? Just considering that maybe it could be me. Maybe I could be one of the exceptions. Maybe I could be one of the people that goes just a little bit further. And I really, really think that has such an incredible ability to completely transform not just your current experience of what it is that you're working towards, but the future of it. Because I go back to the conversation that this friend of mine says him and I had, where he's like, do you remember you were still working as a teacher and you just said, oh, I'm going to be so successful. And the moment it happens, it's going to happen so fast. I don't know where I got the confidence to say something as crazy as that, but I like it. And I think I'm learning that this whole idea of being taught that we need to play small, this whole idea that like we need to diminish certain areas and expertise that we have to make other people around us comfortable, but also to negate or to lessen the fear that we will be humbled by life is being a major stumbling block in us being able to fully, creatively, actively live in the gifts that God has called us for. I think it is diminishing our ability to dream bigger. It's diminishing our ability to explore the possibility of a bigger and better world for ourselves, right? I think of certain struggles that people have faced, right? Like, be it apartheid, right now it's the genocide in Gaza, and how all it took were for people who just dared to believe that freedom was possible. Like, people who looked at the status quo, and the status quo was like, only white people matter, black people can't interact with white people, only black people can have certain jobs, only white people can have these jobs. And for the most part, the majority was in agreement. For the most part, people were like, okay, we will live in the smallness that you have dictated for us. Like, we will live in accordance to what you have said is acceptable for us, and we will succeed insofar as you have said it is possible for us. Until there was a movement of people who said, but what if not? What if the contrary is possible? And at the time, there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that they could even look to as motivation. There was nothing that they could even look at that could say, maybe it's possible. They had to conjure it up in their heads. They had to conjure up a possibility of something like that happening. And because they conjured it up, because they entertained the thought that maybe we could be the exception, maybe we could be part of the people that made it out, they did. Right? And I think we have to look at our lives in the same way and have radical faith, not just in the circumstances changing, but in ourselves and in who we've been called to be and in what God has said about us, right? And part of that really is starting to own our successes, learning how to brag, betting on ourselves, and believing and entertaining the thought that we could possibly be the exception. That in your family, maybe you're the one that makes it out. Maybe you're the one that has a successful marriage where that doesn't end in cheating or doesn't end in abuse. Like, there's so many things that we're afraid to own. Like, we're afraid to say, oh, I think I'll be the exception. I know that everybody says marriage is terrible, but I believe that I can have a different marriage. I believe that I can have a different experience. I believe that I can have a different experience at being a parent. I believe I can have a different experience at success, right? There's also this thing about like wealth or, having money. There are people who have had money their whole lives and never lost it. Like, that's also a possibility. This thing of like, oh, you'll have money, then you'll lose it, and then you'll fall, and you don't want to get so high that you fall too far. That's also just the mind state. And you could choose to believe that, or you could choose to believe the opposite. You could also choose to believe that in whatever circumstance you're put under, you're probably going to be okay. Like, I think that's one of the most helpful ways of thinking about your life, to say, actually, so far, because I'm still here, there's nothing that I haven't been able to withstand. There's nothing that has completely shattered me. And so I think whatever it is that life throws at me, I bet that I'll be fine. And I bet that I can make it out. And I bet that I will be the exception. And I bet that I will be successful. And I bet that it'll work out for me. And so I'm really think about what that looks like in even cultivating it in the spaces that I'm in, but more importantly, cultivating it in my own head. Like, what does it look like for me to not humble myself out of fear that life is going to humble me first? I think our parents and our communities were so well-meaning in raising us to be people that are not tone deaf, to be people who are gracious, to be people who are, just aware of life. But I do think that there are certain things that we need to unlearn now okay, maybe we are outside of survival. Maybe we're no longer surviving anymore. And if we're no longer surviving anymore, maybe some of the tools that we learned to help us survive, maybe some of the things that we taught each other in our communities about like what it means to protect ourselves from fear of failure, maybe they no longer serve us. Maybe instead of being afraid of sharing our plans because we think abantu bazosithakatha or bazosiloya, maybe we need to cultivate more safe spaces where we can brag fully and where people can help us create even bigger ideas of who we can be and what the future looks like. Maybe there is a world where now we are out of survival and we've entered an era of thriving. And what does that look like when we want to complain about, the state of the world? What does it look like when we want to complain about fuel? What does it look like when we want to complain about groceries? Because sometimes I think we're just playing roles. It's not always true. And it's not always that everything is as bad as we say it is. It's just that we want to be liked and we want to commiserate and we want to feel like we can be relatable to one another. But is there a world that's possible where we can relate to one another by being our best selves and by owning the best parts of ourselves, so that the next time somebody says to you, hey, you're onto something there, I think you're doing really well at that thing, you don't go, hey, yeah, maybe. You go, yeah, I think so as well. And I'm building more towards that. And I can't wait to see what becomes of it. Because a lot of the times, even when we did brag at school or whatever, somebody was like, hey, bo, how do you know? Hey, bo, And so now, before somebody else has done it, we do it to ourselves. And I do think that it's important to start shutting or just lowering the volume on our self-criticism. I think that's what it looks like. It's lowering the volume on our self-criticism and dialing up our confidence, dialing up our ability to bet on ourselves, dialing up our ability to not diminish our successes, and to dare to believe that we can be the exception, to dare to believe that the things that we are hoping for might actually happen. And I think if we work from there, we could find ourselves in a very beautiful place where you look back and you're like, I was so intent on believing that this was possible, and I never betrayed myself, and I spoke it into existence, because that's what we've been given. We've been given the power of speech to be able to effectively speak into our futures. And I just noted that a lot of the times where we get opportunities to do that, where we get opportunities to brag about ourselves, and I'm purposefully using the word brag, like it could be self-promotion, it could be whatever, but I do want us to, we know that there's a healthy way of doing it and an unhealthy way of doing it. And I think a lot of the times we are on the very extreme low end of that. We were just afraid of anything, of saying anything good about our lives because we think it's going to be taken away. Don't do that. Own it and believe that, in fact, there's more where that came from. Like the fact that this was possible, that you could make this Molanyana milestone, it means that there's even more that's still to come, and that you don't need to preempt everything going wrong. What if instead of preempting everything going wrong, you preempt and you prepare for everything going right? Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope you found it as helpful as I found it. And we're growing and we're learning together, and really just, I guess this is like an extraordinary take on bragging, right? An extraordinary take on how we see ourselves and how we speak about ourselves and how we speak about our futures, and daring to believe the best possible outcome. Like, it sounds too good to be true, but what if it is true? That's the ultimate point. And this is something that I'm definitely going to keep going back to, because it's something I know I need to cultivate even more. Thank you so much for joining me. See you 2 weeks from now. Anyway, see you when the episode drops. Bye.